What is happening, everybody? All right, so I made a video in the past talking about some, do's and don'ts with modifying a Hemi engine, and one of the weird feedbacks that I got was, well, you're just saying not to modify the car at all because of some of the things that I had said. Well, you got to understand the context that video was put into. It was if you had bought a brand new car and you're modifying that brand new car, well, aside from warranty issues, you could have just bought the more powerful car with the money that you spent in modifications. But getting away from that, this is 2018 and the 8-speed cars, which are the more desirable, have been out for about 3 years or so now. So, yeah, if you've got one on the secondhand market, somebody else has already paid for the depreciation, sounds like it'd be a good idea to start modding that thing with the money that you saved. So what works, right? Okay, so let's start out with 5.7s. First of all, you got to start with a tune. You're going to have to tune the car for whatever modifications you put on it anyway. And you need to start off with a tuner that specializes in whole or in part in Mopar. There's a ton of tuners out there that have tried to tune Mopar only to never want to touch Mopars again. They're a little bit of a challenge, so to speak. So go with a tuner like Pike's Performance Tunes that more or less specializes in Mopar. Now, in part of that tune, you're going to want to tune the transmission as well. Consider that as part of the budget for tuning that vehicle. You will have to have the PCM unlocked, and you will have to pay extra for trans tuning because it is a separate controller. But believe me when I tell you, it is money well spent, and it sets a foundation for your experience to come. Now, in terms of parts to buy, what do you need to get? If you got a 5.7, ditch the factory exhaust. Get you a set of good short tube headers and a cat back or a cat delete pipe, because that is the worst exhaust system ever put on a performance-oriented vehicle. Get something on that car that is absolutely going to help it make power. Do that, and it'll also sound better, but that alone will save weight. You will pick up power, and realistically, it's just a shame that they don't offer that vehicle with a better flowing exhaust system from the factory. But aside from that, what about a camshaft? Absolutely, camshafts work in those cars, but you got to be careful because camshafts in Hemis can be very, very tricky. Go too aggressive and you wind up with a car that is a turd to get off the line, although it will scream on the big end and it'll put down a decent number. By the way, that trend holds true for any naturally aspirated Hemi. Now, a lot of guys have asked about putting a 370 gear out of a manual Hellcat into the 5.7 cars. I say go for it. Makes the car a lot more lively to drive, and you'll be gunning after 392 cars just as soon as you get behind the wheel of that thing and take it for a spin. You'd be surprised what that modification can do for you. So those modifications to a 5.7 will wake it up in a way that will completely change the complexion of the car and will make it feel like it's got a lot more power than it really does. That is about the short list, though, that I would do to a 5.7 unless you want to really start making power. At that point, pick your poison. Nitrous, positive displacement supercharger like a Whipple, or something like a centrifugal like a Procharger. Those are some new ways to make power that you may not have considered in the past, mainly because of possible issues with pistons and things like that coming apart. Look, with the right tune, they hold together just fine. Just keep in mind that you'll become dangerously close to the limits of your HP70 transmission should you decide to go that route. It's up to you. It's your money. Go for it. Spin it however you like, but I like the 5.7s naturally aspirated. They're just a lot of fun with a nice tune, aforementioned parts. The car is going to run great, and it's going to run great for a long, long time. One other option you can go with is to install a set of tie bar rods, rocker shaft tie bars and collars. Stankey makes a set, and in terms of keeping everything stable, they do a great job. So if you're planning on going full boat on this thing, throwing in a throttle body on top of all of that, spinning the car to about 6,800 RPM, probably a good idea to throw those on just for good measure and think of it as a durability mod more than anything else. So what about your 6.4? Now, the 6.4 always gets more airtime, publicity, whatever you want to call it, because it is the 6.4. It's what the grassroots guys are going after if they're going after naturally aspirated power. Well, the same applies, except in the case of the 6.4, the stock manifolds are pretty good, provided that the welds are good. If you were to take a look at 5 different sets of stock exhaust manifolds, they're really headers, but for this purpose of conversation, we're going to call them manifolds. The inner welds on those things can be pretty restrictive. So this is more of a quality control issue than anything else. Options here are have those welds ported out, see if you pick up any power, or go with those BBK 1 7/8 inch Shorty headers. Recently tested a set on a good friend of mine's car, and you know what? Damn thing's picked up power. And normally you only pick up torque with a Hemi. These actually picked up a little bit of horsepower too, so give those a look. One other thing to consider, aside from the stanky tie bars and the collars for your car, I do recommend those. Have that intake ported and put a bigger throttle body on the car. I am kind of a fan of the Fastman throttle body, which is a ported, actual true ported stock throttle body. Gives you 84 millimeters. It's about 10% increase in total flow and picks up some throttle response. Pick up a little bit of horsepower, a little bit of torque along the way. It's worth it though. And in terms of the intake manifold being ported, man, it just depends on how bad your intake manifold was when you got started. Some of the later ones are actually looking pretty good from what I've seen. But that being said, damn, some of the older ones are jacked up looking. In fact, the one that I ported, that I put on my car, that I did specifically because it was so bad, I was able to pick up power with my car with a ported manifold that was in terrible shape. So there are services out there. Again, Peak Speed and MMX both offer ported manifolds. Pick your poison there, but still go with that larger throttle body. I think you'll like it. Just don't go too big. It's completely unnecessary, and based on just the internal geometry of that intake manifold, anything bigger than 84 millimeters, probably wasting your time. As far as any of the rest of the exhaust, leave it alone. If you want to go with the cat delete pipe, just fine, but just remember this, won't pick up any horsepower, might pick up a little bit of torque, but it's part of the tuning process. If you run a set of metal, not ceramic, but metal substrate catalytic converters, there are some changes you can make in the tune that you will actually be able to pick up power, not because the cat or the lack of a cat is flowing better, but it's some protection, catalytic converter protection tables in the computer that once you reach a certain threshold, they'll start, pulling timing and adding fuel. So just a good idea to go with that component. It's, again, working within the parameters of the PCM and the tune that you get for that car. After that, what works? Well, man, to be honest with you, not a whole lot, just in terms of making outright power. But if you have the right components, you can have a car that runs really well. But that'll lead you into camshafts for the 6.4. Look, guys, I'm the guy that has always been in favor of the stock camshaft, but there are a couple of grinds that I would prefer. And as the guy that specs camshafts for Pike's Performance, I can tell you that that list is pretty short. I won't go into detail as far as which camshafts I do recommend. Always, custom grind is the first direction you want to go. But just keep in mind that there will always be a trade-off with a camshaft with power down low versus how the power is going to be made up top in the RPM range. You can't, I cannot emphasize though how important it is to match the camshaft to the intended use of the vehicle. If you're just playing around with it on the street and want something with a little bit of sound, whatever, it doesn't matter. But if drivability is important and if horsepower is important to you, you need to go with somebody who has experience with camshafts, with a Hemi, has proven track records and can basically put something together for you that is not going to ruin your experience. So I hope that helps you guys out. These are some products that absolutely work with the new Hemis. I don't want to mislead anybody. None of these modifications are inexpensive, especially when you start getting into camshafts. You got to pay the Hemi tax, but you can definitely wake them up, definitely see some horsepower, and with the right tune, you'll make that car a lot more fun to drive in the end, which is really the point. So at any rate, if you got any questions or comments, post below. And that's a wrap on this one. Y'all have a great one. Adios.